inviting me here. I came up this morning from Washington, and it looked like Siberia outside, so it was very interesting. But I was happy to come when Deborah invited me and said, this is an event we're organizing and thinking about the year of evaluation in 2015, and I said, certainly, I would be more than happy to come to support that initiative. I have been 3 years at the Inter-American Development Bank almost as head of evaluation. Before that, I was at the World Bank for 3 years as director of evaluation. And before that, I was 25 years working on development, in countries and also at the World Bank. So in lots of different capacities. So I have a sense of the kind of respective role that evaluation plays to all the other work that these important groups do, including the UN. I've had the pleasure of getting to know the UN evaluation group well through many different avenues. We also have the Development Assistance Committee, the DAC. Bilateral donors has a very organized network of evaluators. Our MDB group, the Evaluation Cooperation Group, has 10 members of the Multilateral Development Bank. So you have these three big networks of the UN, of the Multilateral Development Banks, and of the DAC, the bilateral, all also interacting with each other a lot. So we're actually very fortunate to have good institutional systems for sharing experiences and mutual support. I wanted to just say a few words. Deborah had asked me to kick off the panel, just talking a little bit about why evaluation and kind of what it takes to have a good evaluation system, and a few experiences that I've had or that I know about on building capacity for evaluation. So I'll just kind of address those three things in the time allowed. First, I'll just repeat what Deborah said about why evaluation. It's probably all of you don't have to hear this. It's kind of obvious. We need to know what works. We put a lot of money into programs, and it's the thing. Any place in your life, whatever you do, you want to know if it works or not. You want to know if schools work and if medicines work, and all of this is all about evaluation. It is different than audit. Audit was the money spent for the purposes intended. This is, does it work? Is it effective? Relevance and effectiveness and efficiency. What actually happened? It sounds obvious, but so many programs are never evaluated, and the money is spent again and again and again. Frankly, I think a lot of funds, public and private, are wasted because people don't learn from experience. There has been a growth in attention to evaluation in the development field over the last 20, 30 years, a very healthy growth. Hopefully it will continue. I'll get to that in a minute because in some ways it's fragile, I think, but there certainly has been a growth, and we've all been very happy to watch this growth. I might say, in terms of what is evaluation, it is really very difficult. I mean, I've spent about 6 years of my life now leading a group that does evaluation and development programs. This is not easy work because there's really being rigorous and trying to determine causation and really get it right. It takes a lot of data and a lot of thinking and a lot of models. It is quite highly technical work. It's also political work, and we try to be as unpolitical as possible, but people are affected by evaluations, and people will resist, and there are winners and losers. And whether it's within institutions and institutional politics, or within the bigger political world, or just between individuals, there's a lot of emotion around evaluation. And some of us in the room do evaluations. We are affected by it every single day. So it's hard work technically. It's hard work kind of politically and even emotionally. It sounds dry, but I can tell you it's the last thing evaluation is dry. So but I think absolutely essential to use our resources well and to learn what works. What is required for a good evaluation system? I like to think about the supply and the demand side. Supply side, you do need well-trained people. This is a field. It's actually a growing field. In fact, a friend of mine just sent me an email and said it's one of the top 10 good fields to go into. I always say that to people I'm trying to recruit because it is a very skilled profession there. There's a lot of techniques that are useful to know, and it's not just take somebody off the street and do an evaluator. So smart, good human resources are needed. Skilled evaluators. You also need full access to information, which is not a sure thing. If If you're going to do an evaluation, you have to be able to access information, including sometimes confidential information that's difficult to find. You need independence of judgment, at least. Ideally organizational independence, but at least you need to be protected and be in a situation where you're free to speak truth to power and to speak your mind and to have a calm environment to really try to figure out the truth. That also is often a problem. You need transparency and the ability to disclose your findings. If you find an evaluation findings and you can't disclose them, it's not going to be very possible for the beneficiaries to learn. I can tell you that can also be a problem because of the sensitive nature of some evaluation. So on the supply side, the technical, the resources, the access to information, the transparency, I would put that as one set of things you need for a good system. On the demand side, this doesn't happen in a vacuum, and the places where you see the best evaluations are where there's the most demand for accountability. Or at least that is very much helpful in supporting a good function. Where accountability is weak, it's unlikely you will have a good evaluation system because it needs to be nurtured by demand for good evaluation and support for these politically difficult activities that evaluators are doing. So as you see the growth of democracies and the growth of checks and balances in government or in organizations, you tend to have the ability to actually support independent evaluation functions, and they are going to thrive. If you don't have that accountability setting, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to have an evaluation system that really thrives. Of course, it's not black and white. It's always shades of gray. And no country is perfect, perfectly accountable. No organization is perfectly accountable. So I always say to people, it's better to start, to try, to set something up and see if you can grow this function. It's usually shades of gray. So a few examples of some systems that I've run across in my years that I think are really good models. First, I will refer to Mexico, and I was so glad that Graciela is on the panel, because I think if you look around the developing world, my guess is you will not find a better example than Mexico. And then Conoval, personally. It's an extremely impressive example, and she will tell you about it, of evaluation. And the government of Mexico is absolutely on the forefront, and not only in Latin America, but I think around certainly the developing world, in setting up and supporting independent evaluation and learning from it. So again, I hope this continues and grows. Other Latin American countries, Colombia and Chile are two that are also, and Brazil are also developing systems. Other countries I don't know as well, because recently I've worked in Latin America, but other regions of the world are also. South Asia, I think, they're starting in India and new independent evaluation office. And there are other countries that are going in this direction, but South Africa is a big one, and we have someone in the system here who knows that very well. But I do think Mexico is absolutely on the forefront, so it's wonderful that Graciela is here. The multilateral development banks, I'll just tell you a little bit about, because this is the world I know the best, starting with the World Bank, but also the Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, and Inter-American Development Bank, and the European Bank. And the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and EFA, and several others. The model there is an independent evaluation office that reports to the board of directors, completely independent from management. The director is selected by the board, can only be let go by the board for a fixed period of time, fixed pay, that does not vary, can never work for the organization in any other capacity. There are lots of things built in to try to create that sense of independence. They are given their budget off the top. It's not related at all to management's budget. Management has no say in that. There are very clear rules for how you manage evaluations, full access to any information. It can never be denied any information in the organization. There's lots and lots of rules. There's lots of procedures. There's lots of things set up to try to ensure independence and to try to give enough resources to have enough capacity. The resources, they tend to be between 1% and 2% of the budget of the organization are the resources that are set aside for the independent evaluation office in these organizations. And I think they've been really quite good models of independent evaluation, starting probably with the World Bank, that was the first one to set it up and has now 20, 30 years of actually 30 or 40 years, probably good experience on doing evaluations of all kinds. But the other MDBs have also followed that. The IMF has a very independent evaluation office. It tends to be small, but they are totally independent of anyone. Even their board doesn't tell them what to do. They have an independent advisory group. They decide what they're going to do. They have full access to information, and they can say and do what they want. And all of us have websites, and everything we produce is on our website. And I think this is a pretty good model. Actually, it's worked quite well in the multilateral development bank community. Developed countries, of course, the General Accountability Office in the U.S. is exactly this model of really independent, well-supported office that reports to Congress and has full access to information, and for a long time has really been a tremendously important part of the U.S. government system in producing reports on all kinds of things that people watch and people read. It's also a great place to work. I can tell you evaluation is fun because they recently had a survey of the government employees in the United States, and the GAO was the most popular place to work. Other than some teeny little office none of us had ever heard of, GAO came out #1 because it's interesting work. So. And the UK has a UK audit office, and there are other offices like this, but I think it's still in its infancy in some ways. There's many countries that don't have this kind of function, so yeah, it really is useful to continue to build this. Australia and New Zealand have also been on the forefront of this, so we could talk more about examples, but I think we have some very good examples, but we still have a long way to go, and many countries do not have this capacity yet, and many organizations do not have this capacity yet. And I will say, I think it's fragile. It's a tenuous thing. It's easier to eliminate this than to build it. It takes time. It takes years to build these functions so that they work. And they can be closed overnight if the politics in the organization changes, especially maybe not at the level of a national government, but within organizations. It is a fragile thing. It depends on people wanting accountability and somebody standing up for the long term, even if the short term doesn't look good. We do evaluation sometimes that our stakeholders on the board, the ones who support evaluation the most, really don't like what we're saying. And they just have to put the long term first and say, you have the right to say it. Even if we don't like what you're saying, you have the right to say it. And that can be difficult. So I feel these things are fragile, and they need support. It's not just an obvious, easy thing to do. Now, I've seen a number of efforts in my time at the multilateral development banks to build capacity. I think there's more and more effort in the countries that we work in, mostly in the developing world. And the capacity that Deborah was stressing so much. There are some very interesting networks of evaluators. Latin America has the LAC M&E network that has a meeting every year and has many people attend these meetings, hundreds of people, of government officials from all over Latin America, academia as well, think tanks. Of course, other regional networks, Europe has the European Evaluation Association, the Australasia Evaluation Association. There are quite a number of these associations. At the national, and AFREA in Africa is the African Evaluation Association. That's quite an active organization. At the country level, there are also networks of evaluators. The American Evaluation Association has, every year they have a conference. I think it's in November, and it has 4,000 or 5,000 people that attend the conference. It's a very big organization. Evaluations of all kinds, and very interesting work. Also, in South Africa, there's the SEMEA network. Even countries like Sri Lanka, others have networks of evaluators. So these networks are forming of professional evaluators in and outside of the public sector. On the training side, the program I'm most familiar with is called IFDED, and it's in Canada, co-financed by Carleton University in Ottawa and the World Bank. And it trains about 150 evaluators every year for a month in Canada over the summer. A lot of people come on scholarship, and it has trained now, it's been in line for about 10 years, and it's trained 2,000 evaluators, mostly in development, mostly from developing countries. It's a very good program. And they still have a network of all of their alumni that interact on a regular basis. So that's another university programs, of course, on building capacity. We now have a network, a new program called CLEAR, which is 8 donors that come together to help build centers in regions, developing regions for capacity building. And there are 6 centers now, one for Latin America, Spanish-speaking Latin America, in Mexico and CIDE, one in Brazil for the Lusophone countries, one in South Africa for Anglophone Africa, one in Senegal for West Africa, one in India for South Asia, and one in China for East Asia. And this may continue to grow, but all of these centers are now getting support from a multi-donor initiative to build capacity for evaluation, to provide training, to provide seminars, to provide technical assistance, to work with governments to stimulate demand for evaluation. And this is about a 3 or 4 year program, but I think it's planting a seed and seeing if this can grow so that the regions themselves own this capacity building effort and have the energy and the initiative to do this with support from the rest of the world. So this is another way that we all together are trying to build more capacity for evaluation in these countries. Now in the end, as I come back to demand, you have to have countries and governments and organizations and leadership that really wants to know what works and really wants to know the truth in a sense. And we're all here to support that, and I think I'm excited about 2015 year of evaluation, and I think we really need to put a lot of energy into thinking about how to increase demand for evaluation as well. So I might stop there and you can move on with just a few overview words. Thank you.